Welcome to Football Never Sleeps. After that brain cramp on my part, we're ready to rock and roll with you with Notre Dame football. This is our weekly Notre Dame football show every Monday night during the off season, except for the times where there's a conflict. And I know we got one probably coming up next week. But welcome to our show. We welcome your comments, your compliments, especially, and your questions, even more than that. We've got a big agenda tonight. Notre Dame football spring practice restarts on Wednesday. We've got Pro Day on Thursday. We've got soccer press conferences at Notre Dame Stadium on Monday. And we've got all kinds of recruiting. And that's where we're going to start out tonight. But Tyler has the precursor of everything I forgot to tell you, and it's coming up right now.
Yeah, if you are new to the YouTube proceedings, make sure that you have clicked through to comment or submit questions to us. If you're watching us embedded somewhere, whether it's social media or on InsideNDSports.com, you won't be able to send in your comments or questions. So make sure you've clicked through to YouTube. If you're on the desktop version, you should see a chat box to the right-hand side of our talking voices. And if you're on a mobile device of some kind, that should be below. Hopefully everyone can figure that out. Make sure you're subscribed to us here on the channel. Hit the thumbs up button on the video for a like. Turn on your reminders for our channel if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our content. So all those things you can do over here on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber to our website, InsideNDSports.com, we hope you consider taking advantage of a 30-day free trial that we continue to offer. You use promo code NDYT, which is exclusive to our YouTube audience over here. When you sign up, you get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage, special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a big share of our time. And that's where we like to tell people about the things we're hearing about first before we go on YouTube or something like this to talk about them. There's a link in the video description below. And one other thing you can do away from YouTube, if you're interested in joining the Inside ND Sports Bracket Challenge, we are holding one through Yahoo, and you can sign up on the website. There's a banner at the very top. There's an article that explains all the details. Even if you are not a subscriber to Inside ND Sports, if you beat myself, Eric Hansen, and Charleston Bowles, we are going to give 3 months of free subscription away to those folks who reach that high standard.
I know that sounds daunting.
And then if you are a subscriber to the site, you can compete to win a free year extension or a 6-month extension for the top 2 subscriber placements. So lots of different things going on this time of year, even though that's not all football talk, but I wanted to get all that stuff in here at the top of the show. But we'll get back to the football and recruiting talk because, as we say, football never sleeps.
Right. And I will say this about that bracket challenge. I follow women's basketball because that's the team I cover. You guys, none of you could beat me at that bracket. But I'm telling you, I am easy pickings for the men's bracket. So I'd sign up. You only have to beat 2 people that know what they're doing to win that. So off we go with the football. So we're taking stock of Notre Dame football after a busy recruiting weekend and a Wednesday restart to spring practice, that meaning this Wednesday. So Notre Dame holds the second of its 15 spring practices on Wednesday after taking a 13-day break for spring break. After the reboot comes Pro Day on Thursday, then a fairly steady stream of practices leading to the Blue Gold game set for 1 o'clock Eastern time on April 20th at Notre Dame Stadium. And we are going to start out with our opening drive with recruiting heating backs up, or heats back up. All right, heats back up with a wide receiver commitment and pot of gold day, and then another wide receiver commitment. So let's first start out with the details of Jerome Bettis Jr. Sunday commitment. So what can you tell us about, Tyler, about not only Jerome Bettis Jr., but what Notre Dame's 2025 wide receiver bowl looks like after that commitment?
Yeah. So this is a long time coming. I think anyone that's followed our coverage has expected Jerome Bettis Jr. to end up in Notre Dame's class. I logged a future cast for him back in September. a really nice kid, a great story to follow his dad to Notre Dame. He talked about how Notre Dame feels at home for him, which is certainly easy to understand why. He's visited Notre Dame several times. He's been here. He saw his dad go back to school to graduate, which is a cool part of the story there. His sister is also a freshman at Notre Dame right now. So with all due respect to Notre Dame's coaching staff, this was the layup of all layups in terms of a recruiting intensity or pressure you have to put on a kid. But I do think it is a nice get to add to Notre Dame's class. That puts Notre Dame at 3 wide receivers in the class. And Notre Dame is still looking for at least one more. Derek Meadows is at the top of that list out of Las Vegas Bishop Gorman, a longtime target. Notre Dame liked what they saw from him back last summer when he camped at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has continued to apply interest there. There are some others in the running still. Talon Taylor out of the Chicagoland area. Raiden Vines Bright was originally from Arizona, but is at IMG Academy. And Tanook Hines, who's out of Texas. Those guys are also in the mix. But Derek Meadows is the one to know. All you got to do is follow Deuce Knight's Twitter account to know that, because he tweeted a graphic the other day that called Derek Meadows the missing piece. So that's where Notre Dame is putting its efforts into trying to secure a 4th receiver for the class. The other 2 that are committed, I don't think I said their names, Sean Terry and Elijah Burris. All 3 of the receivers who are committed to Notre Dame's class are 3-star recruits, but Meadows is a 4-star recruit. Talon Taylor and Tanook Hines are 4-star recruits as well.
Okay, Tyler, what if both Meadows and Talon Taylor want to come?
Yeah, I can't see Notre Dame saying no to both of them.
Okay.
Or
either of them?
Or either of them. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if Derek Meadows doesn't want in, it's not going to also say no to the other. Or I just don't, it's hard for me to imagine that they'll say no. Now, maybe there's a chance where it's like Derek Meadows and someone else too. Like, I'm not ruling out that those are the only 2. Like, or say if Derek Meadows joins, that Talon Taylor would be the only one they'd add to the class. I know speed is something that Notre Dame was really interested in adding to that wide receiver group. I think numbers are very important, as we've seen at the receiver position in recent years for Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame has to make sure that things are working out in the way it wants to before it commits too many scholarships to that position. And so I think it's a little bit wait and see. So I don't know that all 4, any of those 4, like in a hurry to decide right now. So that's the good part. Like, it's not like Notre Dame's going to be trying to figure out who to say no to, but those are the priorities moving forward. And it's just, I won't believe they'll say no to 2 of those guys until that happens. So I still think it will get to 5, but we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so 2 questions that are interrelated. How good is Bettis, in your opinion?
Yep.
And we get asked this a lot, so let's discuss it. If his name were Jerome Smith or Jerome Hansen Jr., would the Irish have been as interested with the same skill set?
Well, if he was Eric Hansen Jr., definitely. I think Jerome Bettis Jr. has a lot left to prove, both as a recruit and a college ball player, which is okay. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing. He, as a junior at College Park Woodward Academy, which is just outside of Atlanta, he was essentially the number 3 receiver on that team. The team had a senior, Ben Grice, who ended up signing with Wake Forest, and Josiah Abdullah is a junior who was committed to Florida. Those guys had more catches and receiving yards than Jerome Bettis Jr. did. So I think he still has more to prove. I think he has a good frame. I don't know that he's the most explosive guy or the fastest guy, but I think if you're going to reach on a guy, if you want to call this a reach, I think you would do it with someone who has a Hall of Fame football father. So I understand that. I think it's probably more a concern or question from I've received this from fans. I'm not just making this up, because Notre Dame has 2 3-star recruits already in the class, right? At receiver, Sean Terry and Elijah Burris. Those guys aren't exactly sure things yet either. And honestly, I think something I've noticed in my decade of covering college football recruiting is that receiver is one of the harder things to sort of predict. Notre Dame has had some really talented receivers come to Notre Dame and done next to nothing, and quite literally next to nothing in some cases. So I wouldn't live and die by the stars when it comes to wide receivers, but especially when you're talking about a position that needs to improve, you sort of scratch your head when you see a bunch of 3 stars next to the receivers committed to Notre Dame. Now, does the recruiting industry have that wrong? Maybe that's true. Maybe Rivals and Rivals still has time to see what those guys do as seniors to say, you know what, that guy deserves a star rating increase. But I don't know that will happen.
Well, Meadows has certainly upgraded over time.
Yes, Meadows is also someone who hasn't been extremely productive in high school either, but he has better size, better speed than Bettis, at least on paper. And so I think there's more things there. And there's also the caliber of teams that, especially this past couple months, offering Derek Meadows is a bit higher than some of the offers that were on Jerome Bettis Jr.'s list. His biggest next offer was probably Texas A&M, and Texas A&M was genuinely interested in him and was trying to schedule an official visit. So it's not like nobody else was interested in Jerome Bettis Jr. He had plenty of other offers too, but not of the Alabamas and the Oregons and the even I don't even know if Michigan offered Jerome Bettis Jr. And you have to remember, like, maybe people are like, why waste our time? He's going to Notre Dame. So that could play a role too. So there's a lot of factors there. I just think we talk about like NFL legacy guys, which has become a theme for Notre Dame. Jerome Bettis, if you put like Bryce Young on this end and Kennedy Urlacher on this end in the last recruiting class, I think he's probably closer to Kennedy Urlacher than he is Bryce Young. And Kennedy Urlacher is a 3 or 4 star guy, where Bryce Young, I think once I'd even had him as a 5-star guy, a high 4-star guy who's really taken off in his development.
Right. Whose arrow is pointing way up right
now.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, he's only a junior in high school. There's still plenty of things that can happen between now and the time he's needed to play football at Notre Dame. But if you'd like to think if someone's going to get Notre Dame and get what it takes to play at Notre Dame, it would be someone like Jerome Bettis' son. So I think I certainly wouldn't rule him out as a potential impact player for Notre Dame in the long run.
And do we know what the sister's 40 time is?
I do not. I do not know what her 40 time is.
Okay. All right. So we have this thing at Inside ND Sports on the premium side called the Heat Index. It's Tyler's creation, probably inspired by my love of chicken wings, but it's chicken wing sauce themed of recruits. And you're like, well, how would that work? Well, plain means they're probably not real interested. And then it goes up the Scoville scale all the way to extremely hot, which is what Jerome Bettis was before he committed.
Correct.
So is there anybody in the 2025 class, let's leave it at the 2025s for the moment, and we'll get to the 26s in a second, that would be in the extremely hot category that you would like to share?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing that because extremely hot almost always means that I have a future cast in for them. And that's public knowledge. If you go to any of their profiles or you even go to our homepage, you can see the future cast. Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden are a pair of cornerbacks that I think Notre Dame's in a very good spot with. I have future casts in for them. So those are the 2 other guys that are listed as extremely hot at this point. I feel right now feel a little bit better about Mark Zachary than Dallas Golden, but I still like Notre Dame for both. So those are 2 names to watch, and those are guys that Notre Dame hopes to get on campus at least 1 or 2 more times as they move into next season. So I think there's still some guys close to committing in that 2025 class, even though there's not a ton of spots left in the class. And I those are the 2 names that I think warrant the most attention as maybe potential guys to join the class.
Okay, before we get to Pot of Gold Sunday, do we need to take any questions, or do we want to put those?
There's one Pot of Gold question from Ron Robert, which we can get to when we talk about that. Chris W said, "Didn't they have a young Bon Jovi?" And that is correct. Jesse Bon Jovi was a walk-on, though he was not a scholarship player. So yeah, there's been plenty of famous sons who have come through the Notre Dame football roster.
And NBA player sons, we had Corey Robinson and
MLB player sons, Torrey Hunter Jr.
Right. So, okay. So Pot of Gold Day was Sunday, St. Patrick's Day. And if you're on Twitter and you follow Tyler and Charleston, your Twitter feed was inundated. You're like, well, I want to get information about the 68 team men's and women's basketball tournaments. And you just keep seeing these Pot of Gold things. So what is Pot of Gold, and what did it mean for Notre Dame football recruiting?
Yeah, so it's basically the unofficial launch of Notre Dame's push in like the next class. So this being 2024, it's the 2026 class. Like I mentioned, Notre Dame already has 18 commitments in its 2025 class. So Notre Dame is now in a position to start moving forward to the next class, and is doing so with a bunch of offers. Most of the communication is with guys that are getting offers for the first time, although to be fully transparent, some of these guys have known they were going to get offers. It's sort of a, hey, this is what we do. We want you to announce it on St. Patrick's Day. So there's plenty of conversations that happen. It's not like this is the first time that these recruits are hearing from Notre Dame. But they branded it as Pot of Gold Day. They put it on St. Patrick's Day. Made for an interesting day, with it also being Selection Sunday in the college basketball world. But I think, got plenty of attention. They started early and often. I think I was up at 8 a.m. tracking offers. Jerome Bettis Jr., like we mentioned, he announced his commitment at 9 a.m. And that wasn't a coincidence. That was done intentionally to draw attention to Notre Dame and its recruiting efforts. And they don't just offer new guys. They also reach out to kids who they've already offered previously and just say, hey, we want to continue recruiting you. It's sort of a reaffirm their interest in Notre Dame. There are some guys that maybe didn't hear from Notre Dame. And if you didn't hear from Notre Dame and you already had an offer, you probably aren't a priority moving forward for the Irish, which does happen sometimes. It's a pretty short list because I think they went into Sunday with only 25 reported offers. So that increased significantly. I believe there were 87 new offers that we've tracked. Now, my numbers may be off here or there because there's just so much going on with all the different guys. But I think it should be in that range. We had heard that it would be close to 100. And so there might even be some guys that maybe Notre Dame couldn't get into contact with, or even maybe some guys that are committed somewhere or something like that, you know what, thanks for the offer, but I'm not necessarily going to announce it or let folks know what's going on. The big news to come out already of Pot of Gold Day is that Dylan Faison, who is the younger brother of Jordan Faison, has committed to the Irish. He received his offer from Notre Dame on Sunday and then committed this afternoon. Notre Dame was his first football offer. He's a 5'11", 170-pounder, a sophomore at Boca Raton St. Andrews down there in Florida. Like his older brother, Jordan Faison, football and lacrosse star. He had 22 catches for 528 yards and 8 touchdowns as a sophomore this past season. He became the first commitment in Notre Dame's 2026 class. And it just, as soon as I heard that they were going to offer him, I was like, well, I mean, unless he really wants to drag this out, this might be a quick turnaround. And it was even quicker than I anticipated with him announcing a commitment to Notre Dame on Monday. But a pretty similar player to Jordan, shifty, someone that I think has some toughness too, and he's really talented at lacrosse. I don't know who's the most touted lacrosse analyst or any of that stuff, unfortunately, but I think he's been described as a very, very talented player as a lacrosse player as well. So, and he intends to play both, just like his brother at Notre Dame. But unlike his brother, will be coming here on football scholarship rather than a partial lacrosse scholarship, which has since changed, obviously, now since Jordan played last season for the football team.
And for those who haven't been following Jordan in the lacrosse, Notre Dame is the number 2 team in the country. They absolutely waxed Michigan this weekend, and a ranked Michigan team. And Jordan Faison had 3 goals, and he's one of the leading scorers on a team that brought almost everybody back from a team that won a national championship. Now, Jake Taylor had 7 goals, so he wasn't the leading goal scorer in the game, and Jake Taylor is ridiculous. But 3 goals for a freshman on a team this loaded is amazing. So that's an interesting get. And, Notre Dame has had and continues to recruit a lot of players with lacrosse backgrounds, not all of whom want to play both, but Bodie Cahoon is one that has a lacrosse background. Ian Book was a guy, Tyler Buckner. There's quite a few on the current roster that played lacrosse in high school. So really interesting. Okay. Did we want to get to the pot of gold question?
Yeah, we can do that. This question is from Ron Robert. Thanks for the question, Ron. From Pot of Gold Day, any possible surprise recruit that will join the Irish?
Okay, you're going to have to answer that one because it would really be a surprise if I had the answer to that.
Yeah. If I had to pick a surprise, I would maybe say Devin Carter. Now, I'm not predicting this to happen, for the record. I'm taking surprise literally. Devin Carter is out of Georgia. His father is Dexter Carter, who played at Florida State. I believe he was a first-round pick of the 49ers, if my memory serves. Now, he's not a Notre Dame NFL legacy, but he is an NFL legacy recruit, which Notre Dame has had some success with. My understanding is Devin Carter is a good student as well. And I think I said my understand, so it makes it seem like I'm not a good student. My understanding is that Devin Carter is a good student. And at the current time, Monday evening, he's ranked number 51 overall in the 2026 class. I say currently because this week Notre Dame Rivals is unveiling its new rankings for the 2026 class. So that's, if you ask me for a surprise, I'm not saying this would happen anytime soon, but that's just a name that sort of stood out to me as like, oh, maybe Notre Dame can make something happen there.
They kind of parse this out over the week of 5 stars and then the full 250, and they break it down by position and so forth. And I don't know all what's been released, but I was, when I looked through, because we get a sneak peek, when I looked through the 250, I was like, okay, and I don't follow it as close as Tyler and Charleston do. I thought there's a lot of names that seem kind of familiar here. So what's your sense of what the top 250 is going to look like from a Notre Dame standpoint? Will we see a lot of Notre Dame targets on there?
Yeah, there will be. Notre Dame, especially with offering so many guys now, I think they're over 100 offers in the 2026 class. There are a lot of top end guys. So there were 3 new 5 stars that were minted today. All 3 of those guys have Notre Dame offers. Tyler Atkinson is a linebacker out of Georgia. He received his offer yesterday. And then the 2 quarterbacks are Brady Smigel and Ryder Lyons. Both of those guys have been offered by Notre Dame previously. So yeah, I'm expecting to see a lot of the Notre Dame offers, both old and new, in the Rivals 250, because Notre Dame, especially at this point, like there's not necessarily any harm in sort of going after these guys. You're not spending a ton of time and effort in there. Obviously, they did yesterday in recruiting and talking to all these guys, but try to get them on campus and see if it's a fit. They've already done plenty of research. Like, they know the GPAs of all these guys. They have a sense of who maybe matches for Notre Dame and who maybe isn't. But this is the time where you say, you know what? I don't know if this kid is a Notre Dame kid, but let's connect. Let's see if we can get things rolling and maybe surprise people with a guy out of Alabama or something like that. One thing I didn't mention when I was talking about Pot of Gold Day is the success that it's had in the past. So of Notre Dame's 2025 commits, which there's 18 of them, 8 were guys that Notre Dame's talked to on Pot of Gold Day last year, on St. Patrick's Day 2023. So that's like the hit rate we're talking about. Deuce Knight was someone that Notre Dame offered on St. Patrick's Day. Even Jerome Bettis Jr. was someone that was part of it coming full circle for him. A year after he was offered by Notre Dame, he committed to Notre Dame. So it's not, especially early on here, it's worth reaching out to those high-end recruits. And I think not just in the 250, but in the top 100, there's going to be a lot of those guys that have Notre Dame offers already.
The one point I'd like to make, and I'd like you to either refute this or tell me how smart I am. I get this a lot. And believe me, I mean, look at my hair. Look how my house is decorated. I'm a get off the lawn kind of guy. I mean, by just the age group. But people are, in my age group especially, are so concerned about Notre Dame going to the portal for quarterbacks. They'll never be able to get high school guys interested. And you look at, well, CJ Carr, Deuce Knight, and then I'm looking at these 2026 guys that are interested in Notre Dame, or at least Notre Dame's in strong play with. And there's not a lack of interest in getting developed at Notre Dame. What do you say to that? It doesn't seem like it's the big deterrent that people fear that it might be.
No, Notre Dame has found some success. I guess I don't know what it is like, why necessarily. I mean, I think it being proactive is a big part of that, right? I think
I do. I think getting on and identifying these guys earlier is something that Tommy Rees sometimes didn't do.
Yeah, although he was
until late.
He was very early on Tyler Buckner. He just, as it seems right now, maybe we didn't make the right decision there. Right. Or maybe he did, and just Tyler Buckner screwed it and pan out, because that's what happens with quarterbacks. Not everyone pans out. So yeah, I think they've done a really good job of being proactive with that. I think they realize the importance of it, and maybe spend extra time on it and making sure some of the guys that are the first offers in the 2026 class for Notre Dame were quarterbacks. And those are the guys that a lot of those guys have already visited Notre Dame as well. Some guys are coming in for their second visit here in the spring. So I think Notre Dame has really made a priority in working ahead. And it's a cycle, right? Like, if you were able to work ahead with CJ Carr, then you were able to work ahead for Deuce Knight. And if you're not getting those commitments early, it's harder to do that working ahead. And that's something that Notre Dame has been able to do so far. Now, obviously, things get thrown for a loop if, say, Deuce Knight decides to not stick to his commitment, but you're always working ahead and getting those commitments early. And I think you'd rather be in the driver's seat with Deuce Knight for the rest of his recruitment than to be fighting for the end for someone like Kenny Minchie, like they were in the 2023 cycle. I think Notre Dame has done a very good job under Marcus Freeman in trying to make that happen. I think maybe learn some lessons in sort of waiting too long for Dante Moore in Marcus Freeman's first go around with the full recruiting cycle. So that I think they've really been aggressive there and have identified guys. And Notre Dame doesn't always necessarily agree with who Rivals thinks is the best quarterback. I think there was some debate of whether or not CJ Carr was better than Julian Saint or vice versa early on in that cycle. But Notre Dame was like, CJ Carr's who we want. We're prioritizing him. And that's how he ends up in the class.
And I'm putting you on the spot here. Is there a 2026 quarterback that you think Notre Dame will end up with, or is it too early to kind of see how they're tracking there? Because it seems like quite a few have visited, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think it's too early. The two that I've been hearing the most positive buzz for are Brady Hart and Noah Grubbs. Both are out of Florida, and I think Notre Dame is going to continue to have success recruiting those guys. Both are planning to be up at Notre Dame this spring, and so those are the two guys that I think Notre Dame has the best chance at right now. And I think if Notre Dame had its druthers, one of those guys would be committed to Notre Dame sooner rather than later. So maybe we go into the summer with Notre Dame already having a commitment at quarterback in the 2026 class. There's still work to do there, but I think that sort of goes to the getting ahead of that. And then also the quarterback position specifically is very important in trying to get guys to help recruit others in the class. Because that's just how the quarterback position works, right? So if you get a guy early in the class like Deuce Knight was, you can get a guy that helps recruit. CJ Carr was the same way. So maybe they can do that with the 2026 class as well.
Yeah, Deuce Knight's got a lot farther to come to help recruit than CJ Carr could get in the car and be here in 3 hours.
Yeah, and if they get one of those guys from Florida, that would be the same case. But
Deuce needs a high school NIL deal with Delta Airlines or something.
Yeah, it needs Deuce Airlines.
There you go. Okay, are we ready to rock into the spring football topics, or do we have some straggling recruiting questions?
I don't think we have any other questions. I think mostly comments so far. I appreciate Philip and Michael chiming in. I think there was confusion between Dexter Williams and Dexter Carter. Dexter Carter is the father of Devin Carter, not Dexter Williams. So I don't know if I messed up or we're not on the same page there, but that's what I was referring to. All right, go ahead, Eric. Let's talk some spring football.
If Dexter Williams had a college-age son, that would be a miracle. Okay, so the spring practice restart is Wednesday. That's practice number 2, and then they're going to be fairly regularly. There's going to be a little bit of a pause Easter weekend, but they're going to be a fairly good stream of practices coming up. One of the things we saw in practice number 1 way back on March 7th was wide receiver speed. And Marcus Freeman was pretty impressed with it. I'm curious, were you impressed with the speed that you saw on day 1?
Yes, for day 1, I was impressed. I want to see more. I think I've just been burned too many times on the wide receivers at Notre Dame. That's like, okay, I need to see this continue. Maybe last year was burned by their hamstrings. So I think I want to not get too far ahead of myself, but yes, I do like what I saw from the receivers. I thought the receivers looked more explosive. It also helps you have some more guys who are veterans, so they look more polished. So I think confidence in what you're doing allows you to move faster too. So yeah, it was impressive. Will it hold up? We'll see, but a good start, no doubt, and a position that I think is going to be hard for us to take our eyes off of moving forward this spring. What do you think?
I especially, I trust my own eyes, but then when Marcus was kind of gushing about it in the press conference, I felt better about that. Okay, I don't need to go see the eye doctor this quickly for new contact lenses. So yeah, I felt better about it. Now, do we feel like we're going to still feel this way after practice 15? And why I say that is practice, the drills that we saw do show raw speed. It doesn't show production potential necessarily. And sometimes that doesn't translate. Tobias Merriweather, looks good running around in shorts, but it didn't translate to the field consistently for him. And there's other players that are like that. And then there's a guy like Jaden Thomas, who's not a Blazer, who everything translates positively for him when he has a healthy hamstring. So do you feel like when we get to the end of this, we're going to feel better about the wide receivers than we did last year?
Yeah, I do think so. Like I said, reserving judgment, but I do think that the makeup is there for this receiver group to instill more confidence than the one that took the field game 1 last season, or even left the blue gold game field last April. And
we're including 2 guys that are not in the group yet, Logan Sedalte and Bo Collins, a transfer.
Yeah, Bo Collins from Clemson. There's just a lot. There's a lot of bodies there, which is good. So even if you do have a couple hamstrings, maybe you can withstand that. Someday I'll stop making hamstring jokes about the receivers, but today is not the day. So yeah, I think that is something that Notre Dame is equipped to do.
Your hamstrings will be to you what Hot Pockets is for Jim Gaffigan.
I'll have to figure out what voice I want to say hamstrings in.
Hamstrings.
Hopefully people think we're funny. Otherwise, we're getting way off the rails here. So yeah, I do. Yes, I do have confidence in that. I want to see what that looks like in this offense with Mike Denbrock, and I think that combined with the wide receiver talent is what's so exciting about Notre Dame's current situation. I think Mike Denbrock has the ability as an offensive coordinator to create opportunities for wide receivers to make plays and take advantage of wide receivers with expanded skill sets. Now, I don't think Notre Dame necessarily has the kind of receivers that Mike Denbrock had at LSU last season, but I think he showed an ability to have good passing attacks, not just at LSU, but even at Cincinnati and at Notre Dame at times, because and those that it wasn't always with first round draft picks like he had at LSU lining up at wide receiver.
Yeah, I'll tell you, those Cincinnati wide receivers, they really developed those guys. Let's follow up on Mike Denbrock because the next few questions I have relate to him. So, as the offensive coordinator, do you expect Mike Denbrock will be less rigid with the boundary, slot, and field roles? And one of the reasons why I ask that is you have an obvious kind of glut of boundary receivers with Jaden Thomas, with Deion Colsey, and Bo Collins, and really to a certain extent, maybe Micah Gilbert. That's where he was lining up in the first practice. So what do you think about that concept?
Yeah, I think so. I think you got to start somewhere to like get a sense for what those guys are. So it's not surprising that it was maybe a little more rigid in the first practice. But yeah, I think the way offenses have evolved, it's harder to have just like, hey, this is your one role as a receiver. You're going to do it in all these different formations. Especially if you want to play some tempo at times, like you're not going to be subbing guys in and out based on the situation. So I do think there will be less rigidity in Notre Dame's sort of receiver responsibilities. And I think Notre Dame also has some versatility that allows you to do that as well. You mentioned a glut at boundary. I think you could also say that at slot too, right? You got Jordan Faison, Jaden Harrison. I think Jaden Thomas is a good slot receiver in certain situations. There's things he can do out of the slot that are different. Jaden Greathouse. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the two spots where you feel like you got maybe too many guys, whereas maybe the field receiver, it's like, well, it's Chris Mitchell and okay, who else can go make a play downfield for us? That I think that's probably the biggest question about Notre Dame's receiving core moving forward.
Well, I have some more that may not be as big, but I think are compelling. One is, do you think Mike Denbrock will be more creative with sometimes getting 4 wide receivers on the field and also maybe using the running backs in the pass game beyond outlet passes? For example, maybe putting 2 running backs out there and then splitting one out as a true wide receiver and running a wide receiver route. What do you think about those possibilities, the 2 that I just brought up?
Yeah, to the running back thing, they did that right in the first practice, right? There were some running backs lining up in slot going against safeties, and not just linebackers, right? It's easier when you're doing the running back versus linebacker one-on-ones, but when you're a running back being asked to go up against a safety that's a little bit better in coverage, you're being asked to really find a way to separate. So I think there is a willingness from Mike Denbrock to do that. Getting 4 wide receivers on the field, I think that's a possibility too. That's the thing that I think is the maybe hardest thing to sort of like how much can you go away from 2 tight end stuff? Like that's what I'm curious about, because it just becomes so the talent at tight end sort of demands it so often. But has Notre Dame reached a point where maybe the tight end talent isn't that much more overwhelming than the receiver talent, that you can do that? So I mean, and there's also plenty of things you can do with split out tight ends. Notre Dame did that plenty in the past, and I think we'll probably continue to do that with guys that aren't maybe lining up as attached tight ends, but lining up wide and giving you some big bodies on the outside to do some different things too.
We mentioned Dylan Faison earlier. We mentioned Jordan Faison early. This is a Jordan Faison question. Do you feel like him going all in on lacrosse, and he is all in on lacrosse, that he risks getting passed up at a very competitive slot receiver position?
Yes. I think it probably could have happened regardless. Because they're just, like I said, there's a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things at that slot position. I don't think Jordan Faison is going to like not be able to find a role in Notre Dame's offense. I do have my doubts that he's like the clear number one slot receiver and everyone else is like fighting for scraps. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It sort of became that way at the end of the season just because of the way Notre Dame's receivers were playing. But I'd like to think that Notre Dame's going to have better options next season, and they will continue to push those guys. So I think, I still am of the belief that that's Jaden Greathouse's best position. Jaden Harrison, that's where most of his experience has come at Marshall, and he looked pretty good when we saw him in the first practice. So I don't know that it's going to be because Jordan Faison is focusing on lacrosse this spring that will be the reason for maybe not a huge like taking the next step. I think sometimes when you see a freshman do that, you're like, okay, well, what's next for him? It might be somewhat similar to what he did last year, maybe more than him like making a massive leap again. But I certainly, if we haven't learned the lesson by now, don't doubt Jordan Faison should be like rule number one when talking about Jordan Faison. What do you think? What are your expectations for what Jordan Faison can be? And do you think any of that will be because of the way he's spending his spring?
I think if you take Jaden Harrison and Logan Saldate out of the equation, I don't know yet what Jaden Harrison can do as a wide receiver, but his speed really impressed me on day one.
Mm-hmm.
Logan, I've just seen high school film of him. I love the fact that he's a wrestler and can do all that stuff and run down the field fast. But just at the top of the depth chart between Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, I think there is a demand for both of them because they're so different body types. Faison is a thinner receiver, and Jaden Greathouse isn't kind of your classic. I do agree with you. I think it's his best position. He's not your classic slot receiver. He uses his body well to shield. He's a thicker build kind of guy, not as fast as Jordan Faison, I don't think. But man, can he run routes precisely? So I think they complement each other. So I like that. And so I think Jordan Faison gives himself an opening there. I think it's going to be more, is Jordan Faison a better option than especially Jaden Harrison with his experience and his speed as well? Again, he wasn't terribly productive as a receiver at Marshall as he was as a return man. He was elite there. So I'm curious, but Faison, man, I can't imagine, and you can see the football and the footwork translate back and forth between the two sports. So
right.
I don't know that he's completely getting away from football. He's going to be in shape, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he's gonna. There's plenty of physicality that happens in lacrosse, and the evasiveness and elusiveness that he shows.
The spin moves
on the lacrosse field is like, oh man, imagine like having to push him with a stick. Like I don't even know if that's how you describe what you do on a lacrosse field, but it just seems a lot. I don't know what's harder, like trying to stop him in lacrosse or trying to stop him on the football field is what I'm trying to say. But maybe someone better suited to answer that question should be the one answering it, because I'm trying to just ask it.
I actually think lacrosse is his better sport, but not by a wide margin. Just having followed them, kind of cursory following lacrosse because they're good and we kind of have to pay attention to them. Now this year I'm hooked. I need to follow lacrosse, but you don't have a lot of freshmen that come in like that and make that kind of impact on an established team. That's just crazy. Okay, so I got to ask this question in chat, so I'm going to ask you.
All right.
Who would you project as the 3 starting wide receivers August 31st in College Station, and how confident are you that you won't have to edit that answer on August 30th?
I think the slot one is the one that I think I'm the least certain in. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Greathouse lined up out there instead of Jordan Faison. But I guess to me this feels sort of a chalk. But like I think the starting field receiver is Chris Mitchell. I think the starting slot is Jordan Faison, and the starting boundary is Jaden Thomas. What do you think?
I am most confident in Jaden Thomas being a starter. That one, if he's healthy, I put in ink. I would also go with Chris Mitchell. I don't see somebody that's going to threaten him because he's got the proven production and he looks the part with the speed.
Mm-hmm.
And with the slot receivers, I'm giving the nod to Jaden Greathouse because when he was healthy, he was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's going to be a timeshare position anyways, but I would give Jaden Greathouse the starting nod there. And I feel pretty confident about those three. What I'm not confident about is how deep this rotation can and will be. I think it can be deep. I'm just not sure who fits where. I'm having trouble figuring out Deion Colzie or Bo Collins. Who do I like better there? Because I haven't seen Bo play in a Notre Dame uniform. I've seen him at Clemson. And I'm not sure what to make of Micah Gilbert, but I like the first impression he made on me. And I'm not sure what to make of Cam Williams because he should be really good by the end of spring in terms of measuring a freshman, but I'm not sure how that's going to come out either. So
regardless of who it is, it seems like there should be able to go at least 7 deep. Would you agree with that number, or do you
I
think
do,
exaggeration?
and I don't mean to write off KK Smith either because he's somebody we don't know a lot about, but looks pretty fast.
Yeah, I think he's
really skinny.
He's the guy that
needs to go to training table.
Yeah, he's the only one that seems to resemble the kind of things that Chris Mitchell can do. Now, he hasn't done any of those things yet in his college career, but the guy that maybe can stretch the field opposite the boundary side, I think maybe KK Smith can push for that. So I don't know. What is that KK Smith? Is it Jaden Harrison? Is it any of those guys? I just think regardless of who it is, and like you said, Bo Collins or Deion Colzie, who do you have more confidence in? I would side with Bo personally, but if it's the other way around, that guy is probably still contributing regardless of which one it is, right? If that's if Deion Colzie proves to be better than Bo Collins, that's probably a good thing for Notre Dame because that means Deion Colzie's playing and is outplaying someone who was a regular starter at Clemson. So I think those are going to be interesting battles to see who's going to be able to fight for roles beyond just those starting spots at receiver, because I don't think we're going to see anything like the Fiesta Bowl and Marcus Freeman's first start where there's just no receivers left to play and the receivers are gassed because they're out on every play. I think there's going to be plenty of rotation and guys mixing in there, which gets a little bit to this question. Maybe I read TD4ND's mind. Do you see the wide receivers rotating similar to how the running backs have been rotating?
It can be. I know that Mike Denbrock, when he was the wide receivers coach here before, he was a believer in that. If you had that kind of depth, he was good with that, and he felt like he could coach that. There was some of Brian Kelly's influence, and sometimes Brian would get a little bit impatient and want Mike to shorten up the rotations so that the quarterback maybe had better timing and consistency with the receivers. But I think Mike Denbrock will have confidence that Mike Brown can coach the receivers to play in a deeper rotation. So, and I mean, I think that it would benefit Notre Dame to do that. Mm-hmm. If you have that many receivers, I mean, it would seem silly if you have 11 or 12 of them, whatever it is, and I think it's 11 and you're only playing 4. That doesn't seem to make much sense. Why'd you bring all those guys in anyways then?
Yeah, I think the one thing that has to remain a constant is that those guys are on the same page with the quarterback,
right?
Which makes it a little bit different than running back, right? Like running back, they have a responsibility that they're supposed to do. They're given the ball, they do it. Now, obviously, there's complications with pass protection and stuff like that, and all the running backs need to be on the same page with the quarterback and the offensive line with those things. But the receivers also have to have chemistry with the quarterback, and so that can challenge your ability to rotate as deep as you'd like. But if those guys can do that, then that I think there will be a situation where Notre Dame can rotate freely at the receiver positions and not feel like, okay, this is our running wide receivers option. Like, I don't think we're going to see like the days of Daniel Smith and James Anawalu being thrown out there to block at wide receiver.
Daniel running play Smith.
Yeah, right.
Hey, he married Skylar Diggins. He did okay.
He's doing better than all of us. We got some more questions here. Brian Habermill asked, I think it got in a little bit after our quarterback discussion with recruiting. Are they looking at drop back quarterbacks or mobile guys?
Well, I think you want to answer that. I think a lot of guys are listed as pro style that have mobility to them. So if you're thinking, I guess I would say they would probably more resemble CJ Carr than they do Riley Leonard. What would your assessment be? Because you've seen those guys.
Yeah, there are some like I think Ryder Lyons is pretty mobile, and I think he's still listed as a pro style guy. Deuce Knight is obviously a mobile guy. If you've watched any of Deuce Knight play,
yeah, I meant the 26.
Right. Yeah, so I'm just like I don't think Notre Dame is like we have to have a mobile guy or we have to have a more drop back. I think they want him to be able to do a little bit of both. Like maybe some are better at being mobile than others. But I think the arm talent is going to be probably first, and what they can do in terms of getting that player to fit Notre Dame's offense. But yeah, there certainly isn't anyone in the 2026 class that is the type of mobile quarterback that Deuce Knight is. Now I don't know if I haven't talked to anyone to see like, hey, are you trying to like maybe go opposites? Like, okay, we got a CJ Carr type. Now let's get a Deuce Knight type. Now let's go back to a CJ Carr type. Maybe there's some interest in doing that. I don't really know if it's as planned or regimented that. I think sometimes the talent that's out there that you can get to come to Notre Dame like dictates that, right? Like if there's more pro style quarterbacks that are interested in Notre Dame than there are mobile quarterbacks, then you're probably going to have to lean towards the pro style quarterbacks. So I think it's sometimes it's dictated by the talent in the class. But from my recollection, I think most of the highly rated 2026 guys are more pro style guys than dual threat guys. But that doesn't mean they're like statues back there. That's becoming less and less of a possibility.
Well, the actual pro style quarterbacks in the pros are becoming less statues.
Right. Yeah. Like, yeah. If who's the best pro quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, he's not what you consider a pro style quarterback 10 years ago. So I think pro style has certainly developed and advanced in significant ways.
One thing I'll add to that, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but I remember talking to Mike Denbrock, and he said the ability for a quarterback to run and be part of the running game is essential in today's college football. So it cannot be somebody who's a statue.
Right.
So there's going to have to be at least, some level. I'm trying to think who, and he cited that he thought Sam Hartman did a good job in some situations. I think Mike would want more than that, more than what Sam Hartman gave Notre Dame. Not to the level that Riley Leonard is, because Riley Leonard is going to be one of the best running quarterbacks, if not the best running quarterback in college football. And Jaden Daniels was also number one in pass efficiency.
Right.
So you can be very good at both. You don't need to be one or the other.
TD4ND asks, what is your comp for Deuce Knight?
I'll let you go first while I ponder.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a very good comp for him. I know, like, I'm pretty sure that Alabama, and Alabama being the former Washington coaching staff, is comparing him to Michael Penix. Now, maybe that's just
I don't. No.
Well, that's easy to do as a recruiting pitch, right? Like you say, hey, this is what we had. This is who you could be.
Penix didn't run very much at all. I don't see that.
Well, Penix did run more early in his career. Then he had injury problems, and I think that became less of a priority. I think, and so, yeah, like and I think it's more attractive.
Okay, well then I'll comp him to Joe Montana.
Right.
I
No,
want him
listen,
to,
I'm not saying that's
yeah.
my comp for him. I'm just telling you that's what's out there. I think I think
I
then
think
what Notre Dame
I'll
says is like
complain.
Mike Denbrock's gonna say, "Hey, you can be Jaden Daniels." It's like, well, of course, like you're gonna recruit to what you've done before, like if you can. So I mean, I think certainly like Jaden Daniels would be the optimistic version of it. I don't know that I see that quite yet for Deuce Knight. I think Deuce Knight is raw as a quarterback prospect, but the ceiling is very high. I think he has an impressive arm. Maybe he doesn't have the accuracy always at this point of his career, and has plenty of things to work on. So I think I guess Jaden Daniels would be where I would lean, but like I don't know how realistic that is necessarily. So
Well, I mean, Jaden Daniels wasn't a finished product even 2 years ago, so I don't think that's an awful comparison because he evolved quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat here. Michael says Cam Newton. Carberry Q says Lamar Jackson. I would
Wow.
like if yeah, right. Yeah,
I mean, and they are comparing skill sets, not the level of
correct.
accomplishment.
Yeah, right. Like, that's the thing about comps. You're usually not going to say, "Well, this kid reminds me." I think I remember I compared Blake Barnett to what was the guy's name? I think it was Taylor Kelly.
Yeah, that's the guy that runs 3D QB.
Yeah, and he's a QB coach. And Blake Barnett was like a 5-star recruit, and no one's like, yes, he's the next Taylor Kelly. But like
the next Jason Kelly.
I think Blake Barnett's career maybe turned out more to be similar to that. So when you're talking about comps, they're usually always like high end, and so it can be a little bit hard and misleading. I don't see Brian chimed in with Brandon Wimbush comp. I don't necessarily see a lot of similarities in their game right now. Certainly, I think and I mean, maybe I'm biased, but because of what I thought Brandon Wimbush was going to be great in college. Like I was shocked that he wasn't better.
Me too.
So Brandon became much more of having to rely on his legs than I thought he would be at the college level. So when we're talking about high school guys,
only he could have brought Minka Fitzpatrick with him.
Right. It's so hard to project so far in advance, but I think it'll certainly be interesting to see what Deuce Knight can become at Notre Dame. A couple more questions. And then I did want to get to a little bit of linebacker talk because I did say we would talk about it, but I know we won't talk about it long because we're already getting to an hour here. Quick questions here. Jeffrey Stevens asked, besides talking with Rudolph on Thursday, what other interviews are coming up?
Okay, so that's going to be Wednesday. We're talking to Joe Rudolph, Al Washington, the defensive line coach, and then a good portion of the offensive linemen themselves and the defensive linemen themselves on Wednesday. Thursday, we have pro day, so pro day interviews. Saturday, we have Marcus Freeman only. We don't have access to practice that day. And I also have a basketball game to cover, Notre Dame women against Kent State, which I'm looking forward to, the NCAA tournament. So those are the ones coming up this week. And then on Monday, we can kind of go through what our weeks look like in terms of interviews.
Brian Habermel asked, how was LSU in number of plays per game last year? I know ND was in the 60s per game last year. I don't know. I pulled up the NCAA stats. I don't have the per game and I have to do the math. So 841 plays. They played 13 games. That is 64.7 plays per game. So that's what LSU was last year. And LSU was the leader in total offense last year with 543.5 yards per game.
Yeah, you are right on the 64.7. And
I don't know where that ranks though, because I didn't know where to look that up right away, but I could find the plays per game or total plays.
I would have to count down, but as I'm just kind of looking here as I'm going through it, it is closer to the bottom than it is the top, probably 2/3 of the way down.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the linebackers, Eric.
Okay.
Before we get out of here.
All right. So the linebackers.
Here, let me pitch it to
Okay,
you.
so how do you see the linebacker depth chart settling after spring?
Yeah.
And do you think we may see more base defense in 2024 than we've seen maybe the last couple of years?
I'm not convinced on the base defense part of things yet. Like that, I have to see a lot more of Notre Dame's Rovers in order for me to believe that is a realistic prediction for Notre Dame. So I'm going to stick to nickel back, to nickel being the base defense now, or more frequently used, however you want to describe it. Now will there be more base defense used with 3 linebackers? Maybe, but like I said, I don't know that I'm convinced of that yet. But we'll see. In terms of the depth chart, my personal projection is Jalen Sneed at Rover, Drake Bowen at Mike, and Jack Kaiser at Will. And then behind each of those guys, Jaden Osbury at Rover, Kingston Viliamuasa at Mike, and Preston Zinter at Will. That's how I see it. Do you have any disagreements there?
I don't, although I think when they go to 2 linebackers, Sneed would be kind of the second option at Will. He'll slide inside. I think Osbury is going to show whether or not he's ready to play inside and outside this spring too. He's fascinating to me. He's bigger than Sneed now, which doesn't seem possible. And I think if there is a guy that's close to taking that step to being more Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah-like in terms of what a Rover is supposed to be, I'm not saying he is. Mm-hmm. He is the closest to expressing those kind of skills. I think Jalen Sneed has the athletic ability to be. Right. I don't think he has the production and the confidence and the training yet that he can go running with a slot receiver.
And yes, Brian, Rover is who gets subbed out in the nickel package. And Notre Dame does have, when it goes to nickel, the Mike linebacker becomes the Mac and the Will linebacker becomes the money, because I'm the Mac and Eric's the money, or I can't remember.
It's the opposite.
Oh man, I knew it. So yeah, I'm going to keep messing that up, but we will not mess up the linebacker's actual alignment. But yeah, I do think there will be roles for different guys too, right? Like, even though I say Jalen Sneed's maybe the Rover, I do think there will be some opportunities for him to play maybe Will linebackers in situations. Obviously, we've seen him do some rush in nickel and dime
just runs up to the line and not blitzing, where he is like a defensive end,
essentially an end, right? So I think there's going to be different roles for those guys. Like maybe Kaiser plays some Mike linebacker in nickel or dime packages. I think there's some different things that Notre Dame will be able to do there with the different skill sets it has at linebacker moving forward. I have a couple more questions I wanted to squeeze in here before we get out of here, if you don't mind, Eric.
Okay.
Carberry Q asked a question about the 14-team playoff. Do you guys think college will adapt a preseason like the NFL?
No.
Yeah, I don't see that either. There's no chance that, especially if players are going to become employees, that they're going to agree to a preseason. It's going to be long enough as is. Michael asks, is it possible to ever provide or give some in-depth info on the ladies Notre Dame basketball recruiting? Love watching the ladies play and represent ND. Hannah Hidalgo is a generational player.
I'll do some articles on the free site every once in a while on recruiting, and I'm probably due for that pretty soon as in terms of general recruiting. But I usually put a lot of tidbits about visits and so forth on the Insider Lounge. I do have a big Notre Dame recruiting story coming tomorrow, a big story on Kate Koval, the 6'5" center from Ukraine, and then Long Island Lutheran High School, the #1 high school team in the country. One of the more fascinating profiles that I feel like, because of the subject matter, not necessarily on how I did it, but I hope I do it justice. But that's going to be running tomorrow. So check that out on Inside ND Sports.
Yeah, the best way, I think Eric has better information than anyone else in terms of Notre Dame women's basketball recruiting. The best way to get access to that is to be a subscriber over on InsideNDSports.com. That is one of the perks of being a subscriber there. And if you're not a subscriber, you can take advantage of the deal that we've been promoting, a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com with promo code NDYT. You could also maybe try your luck at the Inside ND Sports Bracket Challenge for a way to get a free subscription. If you are a first time or a free user and not a subscriber over to the site already, you can sign up. And if you beat both or all three of myself, Eric Hansen, and Charleston Bowles, you get 3 months for free. We'll reach out to you at the email address through Yahoo. That's who we do the tournament bracket through. Head over to InsideNDSports.com. There's a couple of links on the homepage for that if you're looking for it. But we're hoping to drum up some interest in the men's basketball tournament. I know there's a lot of interest from the women's basketball side in terms of Notre Dame coverage. Eric will be all over the women's team in terms of covering their games and all the access to them between now and whenever their tournament run ends. And we'll have plenty of that coverage as well. We know football isn't necessarily the top priority for Notre Dame fans right now, even though it is a high priority all year round. Yes, TD4ND, hit the like thumb on this video if you've been on the stream. Thanks for everyone chiming in the comments. A good group tonight. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here, Eric?
In 1 minute, tell us what the soccer announcement was, and did you ask new AD Pete Bavacqua anything but soccer questions?
No, we were asked to keep the questions to soccer, and the announcement is that Notre Dame will be hosting a game between Chelsea FC. A friendly. Yeah, good call. A friendly between Chelsea FC and Celtic FC, July 27th in Notre Dame Stadium. So that'll be the second time they host a European football game in Notre Dame Stadium. So tickets go on for sale for that later this month. There's a story at InsideNDSports.com if you are interested in that kind of football. And that will be an interesting event in the late summer before football season, preseason practice gets going.
I only cover press conferences for unfriendlies. Thanks to everybody for your questions and your comments and your compliments and for putting up with us. And we'll see you next week. We may have to move off Monday night because of women's basketball, but we will see you next week.
Yeah, that's a good reason to hit the notification bell so you can get a notification to be reminded when we're going to go live next week. You can also look for announcements from us on Twitter or on InsideNDSports.com. We'll always keep you updated on when that's coming out. But yeah, probably won't be next Monday, but we'll let you know when we can get an hour to get live in front of you guys on YouTube. And thanks for joining and enjoy the week.